All right, so PEMF is like a gem. It's the sort of, in a sense, a hidden gem, although more and more people are becoming aware of it. So PEMF stands for pulsed electromagnetic field. So one of the first things we got to get rid of is the elephant in the room. And the elephant in the room is EMF. People know about EMF with 5G, wireless, cell phones, and so on. So EMF is a completely different technology. EMF is designed for communication, right? That's its purpose, for communication. And human beings may get in the way. The potential risk behind EMF is that EMF is extremely low frequencies. So a frequency is like a wave. So you could have a very wide wave or you could have a very narrow wave. Microwaves are very narrow waves. So we talk about hertz, H-Z for short, but H-E-R-T-Z. Hertz is the measure of a pulse, a frequency, between one wave and the next. So EMFs are very high frequency, and they are basically absorbed by the body. Because the wavelengths are so short, they don't go all the way through the body.
He's a best-selling author, award-winning filmmaker, inspirational speaker, certified nutrition coach, plant-powered athlete, and host of the #1 holistic health podcast in the world, Nathan Crane.
Hey, welcome back to the podcast. Before we get started, I want to give you a free gift that I have spent over a decade researching thousands of hours of peer-reviewed studies and interviewing hundreds of world-leading functional medical doctors and cancer conquerors that lays out a blueprint for helping your mind and body become a cancer-fighting fortress for natural cancer prevention and healing. And that's my Amazon #1 best-selling book, Becoming Cancer-Free. The physical copy sells for like $10 on Amazon, which, you can go get that if you want, but I'm happy to give you the ebook absolutely free. Just head over to becomingcancerfree.com and you can download that ebook instantly. Again, that's becomingcancerfree.com, and it's yours as a gift from me to you for tuning into this podcast. All right, let's get to the show. Today, we are joined by my friend, Dr. William Pawluk. Dr. Pawluk is a board-certified family physician. He's got a practice near Baltimore, Maryland. He has academic appointments at numerous universities. He's had training in acupuncture, homeopathy, hypnosis, and bodywork. He's really considered one of the foremost authorities in the world on pulsed electromagnetic therapy. And Bill, thanks for coming on the podcast, man. Great to have you here.
It's my pleasure, Nathan. It's always a pleasure to meet with you and chat with you and share and exchange vitality.
Yes, sir. So PEMF therapy. What is it? Why do people need to know about it?
All right, so PEMF is like a gem. It's the sort of, in a sense, a hidden gem, although more and more people are becoming aware of it. So PEMF stands for pulsed electromagnetic field. So one of the first things we got to get rid of is the elephant in the room. And the elephant in the room is EMF. People know about EMF with 5G, wireless, cell phones, and so on. So EMF is a completely different technology. EMF is designed for communication, right? That's its purpose, for communication. And human beings may get in the way. The basis for the potential risk behind EMF is that EMF is extremely low frequencies. So a frequency is like a wave. So you could have a very wide wave or you could have a very narrow wave. Microwaves are very narrow waves. So we talk about hertz, H-Z for short, but H-E-R-T-Z. Hertz is the measure of a pulse, a frequency, between one wave and the next. So EMFs are very high frequencies, and they are basically absorbed by the body. Because the wavelengths are so short, they don't go all the way through the body. They're absorbed
High frequency, and when you're talking about high frequency, you're talking about measured in hertz. They have a high hertz.
They have a very high hertz, megahertz, gigahertz.
Give some examples of what a high hertz would be and some examples of that, like wireless Wi-Fi routers and so forth.
So Wi-Fi routers and cell phones and microwave ovens are operating at the level of gigahertz. So gigahertz would be billions of hertz. In other words, it would be a billionth of a wavelength, of a single wavelength. The wavelengths are very short. For example, the length of the body from foot to head, top of the head, is about 100 megahertz. So anything that's smaller than that basically gets absorbed by the body. So a normal radio wavelength in the, say, the kilohertz range, or a radio signal, or another kind of signal in the kilohertz range is going to be miles long. Now it'll go right through the body. So the key is that PEMFs are very long wavelengths if they are wavelengths. That means they go all the way through. Whereas the very short wavelengths, the microwave wavelengths, get absorbed. And that's the purpose, that's the basis behind a microwave oven.
So this is verified information, what you're talking about. I mean, this is published in PubMed. I mean, people can go and look up this for themselves. I'll share one article right here. But the electromagnetic field exposure on central nervous system, right? There's a lot of these studies. You have tons of these studies on your website. I've looked at these over the years, but talks about specifically how these EMF frequencies that you're talking about in these gigahertz can get or do get absorbed into the body. So when they say absorbed, I saw it in here. I have to look through this, but people can go look this up. When it gets absorbed into the body, you're basically talking at a cellular level, right? It's being absorbed instead of passing through the body. It is actually potentially causing biological hazards because it's being absorbed at a cellular level. Can you talk more about that?
So yeah, so a cell is smaller than the head of a pin, than the point of a pin. Cells are extraordinarily tiny. And when a wavelength comes at it, right, then that cell either goes right on through the cell. In our case, we're not just talking about a cell, we're talking about a collection of cells, which is a tissue. Then we're talking about an organ. And then we're talking about the whole organism, in other words, the whole body. So these very short wavelengths are absorbed by the very most superficial cells of the tissues. And that's why we get damage to the skin from sunlight. Extremely high wavelengths that get absorbed by the tissues and cause radiation damage. So if you get enough exposure, you get a strong enough field of very short wavelength stimulation, that it causes disruption of the cells. It breaks apart the cell because it's heating the cell. It's damaging the membrane of the cell, and therefore the cell dies. So a very long wavelength goes right on through. Just keeps on going.
Now, the research I've done also specifically for cancer with EMFs is that it looks pretty convincing that what the EMFs are doing at a cellular level, you said it damages the membrane, which is a big problem, but it also seems to damage the mitochondria inside the cell, which,
that's correct.
According to Otto Warburg and the research, the Nobel Prize laureate, and the research he did in the early 1900s, and that has been replicated on and on over the decades, that mitochondrial dysfunction is at the root of cancer. And so if EMFs are causing mitochondrial damage and die off of mitochondria, then we're talking, hey, there's a potential mechanism for cancer, right? Have you heard of PEMF therapy for cancer? Well, this podcast is brought to you by Dr. Pawluk, and he wants to share with you the groundbreaking research of pulsed electromagnetic field therapy in the treatment of cancer. Studies show PEMF therapy can help control the cancer process and give safe, non-toxic, and non-invasive symptom management. PEMF therapy may enhance other cancer support and treatments, lower inflammation, and promote tissue healing. Studies show it's possible to improve your general well-being and recuperate from surgery, radiation, and chemo better and more quickly. Embrace a comprehensive approach to cancer treatment with PEMF therapy, a vital tool on your path to prevention, treatment, and recovery. For caring and professional guidance and recommendations from Dr. Pawluk, go to drpawluk.com/intro to cancer. That's drpawluk.com/intro to cancer. Hey, so if you've been following me for any time now, you know that I often talk about Helin 951, the nitrogen fermented organic soy drink. I first learned about it at an integrative cancer event years ago, and I've been taking this myself for a long time. It's so potent and it has a strong flavor. So I add their organic mint powder to it, and it's easy to take any time of day. I usually take it in the mornings. You know, I'm constantly looking into natural health products, and the ones that catch my eye are the ones with years of proven results and the science and research to back them up. I love that Helin 951 checks all of these boxes. Made from a unique 100% organic soybean grown in the high mountains of Mongolia, Helin 951 has some incredible health properties. Just a few of the benefits are more energy, better sleep, detox, longevity, better immune function, and some fantastic anti-cancer compounds. The folks over at Helin have made a page just for our followers to learn more. You can head over to helin951.com/crane. That's HAELAN 951.com/crane. They have special discounted packages there for you to get you started. And if you use the promo code CRANE, CRANE, at checkout, they will also give you free shipping. So head over and grab this special offer for yourself and use the free shipping promo code CRANE, or just give them a call if that's easier for you. They are so easy to work with and have over 32 years in the industry. Again, that's helin951.com/crane. You know, with the cold and flu season here, it's critically important that we enhance and strengthen our immune systems. Yes? Would you agree? The problem is, though, that there's so much confusion out there when it comes to what actually works for our bodies and for our health. Well, I'll tell you what I use. I use Maison Beljanski's wellness products. Maison Beljanski's products are backed by science to not only help empower the immune system, but can support detoxification and contribute to our overall health. Coming from Europe, the all-natural Beljanski formulas are now available in the United States and are recommended by top doctors everywhere. A lot of the colleagues I work with, functional medicine practitioners that work with patients with all kinds of diseases, are recommending Maison Beljanski's products to their very own patients. As a special sponsor of this podcast, Maison Beljanski has included a very special discount offer for all of my listeners. You can get 15% off your first order using the promo code Nathan, and you'll always enjoy free shipping when you order 4 products or more. You can grab your wellness products today at maisonbeljanski.com. That's MAISONBELJANSKI, maisonbeljanski.com, and use code Nathan for 15% off.
Well, it goes way beyond that, obviously. If you destroy the cell, right, if the wave hits it and the cell starts to heat up, then everything inside the cell begins to get damaged. And of course, the mitochondria is part of that process of cellular damage. And if you create enough collateral, in other words, enough cells are involved in that discharge of wavelengths, then you can have tissue damage, not just the cell damage, but tissue damage. So the collection of individual cells damage then creates a damage to a tissue, which then can eventually create damage to an organ. But it starts with a tissue damage. So once you create damage to that tissue, whether it's mitochondria or the other cellular components, all the other cellular components inside the cell. But mitochondria are critical, but they're not the only structure inside a cell that can be damaged and then produce reactions that then cause the body to have to immunologically deal with it. And it's the immunologic reaction to that cell damage that then causes cancer to progress.
So EMFs getting absorbed. I mean, this is such a hard concept, I think, to logically wrap your mind around, because number one, we don't see EMFs. They're invisible frequencies that are being passed, between cell phones to towers, Wi-Fi to this, laptop and so forth. These are invisible things. We can't see them, number one. Number two, then we say, depending on the type of EMF, it's either passing through your body, which you're saying is pretty much harmless, or it's getting absorbed into your body. And we think of, absorbing things. It's like we're absorbing water from the fruit that we eat. We're absorbing, toxins into our skin when we put lotions with toxins on them into our skin, going into our bloodstream. But this invisible energy getting absorbed into the cell, I think is hard to, fathom, just even hard to even wrap our minds around it.
Sunlight is absorbed into the cell.
There you go. That's a great example.
Right? Sunlight is radiation from the universe is absorbed by our cells to varying degrees, again, depending on the wavelengths. So clearly sunlight is radiation. It's ionizing radiation, and then it's causing cellular damage. And those are extremely short wavelengths as well. So it's a collective damage that causes the problem. It's not the individual cell by itself. You can damage an individual cell and the body will recover it. But we have collections of cells that are damaged, and there's enough damage that you can't recover those cells. In other words, you can't repair them, or you can't repair them fast enough. Then that's when the body's systems for repair and reprocessing and reprogramming and so on can't keep up. And then if you do that enough times, over and over and over again, then you create enough damage. It's a snowball, it's just a tiny little snowball versus a big snowball. So you created a big snowball. Let's think about it this way. If you put a cell phone to your ear and you hold it there and you listen to a message, let's say you're talking on your cell phone for about 15 or 20 minutes. What happens when you remove the cell phone from your ear?
I haven't done that in a long time because I always use my speakerphone like this because of that reason. But
right.
If I remember, or I will use my AirPods sometimes, and I try to use them sparingly, but they're Bluetooth, and I know that's not ideal Bluetooth.
And that's still radiation, but it's less.
It's still radiation, but yes, it's like it's either warm or hot or like almost starts to hurt a little bit, right? If I remember holding like this for a long time, it's like it becomes uncomfortable. It becomes uncomfortable.
The ear will turn red.
Now, is that due to inflammation? Is it causing inflammation? Is that what's happening?
It's increasing circulation. But what you're doing is you're basically cooking the ear. Because those microwaves are right next to the ear, and they're broadcast into those tissues very superficially. If you do a cell phone to that ear for hours a day, for days on end, we found that there's an increase in tumors at the base of the skull.
Yep, I've seen that research. I've shared that research. Yeah, significant increase to glioblastomas on the exact same side of the ear that you hold the phone to consistently. And as you said, repetitive
stress over time.
Yeah, and it is causing inflammation. I mean, that is one of the mechanisms.
Absolutely. Absolutely it is. It's cooking the ear. So you're not a microwave oven, but you're acting like a microwave oven when you're putting a cell phone to your ear.
Now, what if I hold the cell phone, a foot away from me like this and use a speakerphone like this?
Okay, so you're still getting some radiation.
Right.
It's just not very much. So obviously radiation drops off extraordinarily rapidly with distance, and that's called the inverse square law. And because it does that, so if you take a 1,000, the same example works for magnetic field therapy. If you take a 1,000 Gauss magnetic field, so Gauss is the intensity of the magnetic field. That's a very strong magnetic field. The Earth's magnetic field is half a Gauss. Gauss is G-A-U-S-S. So that's the intensity of the magnetic field. So if you use a 1,000 Gauss magnetic field, 1 centimeter away, 1 centimeter, like just half an inch away, you've lost 75% of that intensity. So the same thing applies to microwaves. Depending on the power of the microwave, if you're sitting right next to a microwave transmitter, right, it's going to be a lot stronger than being a half a mile away.
Now you're talking about a tower that's like a cell phone tower. Yeah, cell phone tower, microwave tower.
Now that's a transmitter. It's a microwave transmitter. So if you're right next to it, you're going to get a lot higher intensity of the microwave field than you will if you're half a mile away. So
yeah, I've seen studies. I've seen studies that people who live within, I think it's a 1 mile radius of cell phone towers, their cancer rates go up substantially, and it's been in this has been researched.
Right, because it's cumulative damage.
Yeah, it's
cumulative. So if you just do a 1 minute blast a mile away, not much is going to happen. Your cells will be tickled a little bit, but there's not going to be any significant damage. So the damage, the insults are repetitive, and they happen over a long enough period of time, and the cells don't get a chance to recover adequately, which is why the cancers begin to grow. So if you have a house in the path of a microwave oven or a microwave tower or a microwave signal, then yes, you have that increased risk. But our day-to-day average exposures are not that typically that high. Unless you're passing from one tower to another tower to another tower, you're driving down the road, then yes, you could be. And you're doing the same road every day, months and years on end, then that slight amount of damage begins to build up over time.
Now, I have a electromagnetic frequency measuring device. And so just kind of back up what you're saying here, I will take it and as I walk closer to my Wi-Fi router, it starts beeping, 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 and then starts beeping really loud and goes red. It's like, hey, this is sending off a significant amount of electromagnetic frequency. And then I back away 5 feet and it goes to normal, right? So
almost, well, it's still there, but
yeah,
it's not to be detected by the equipment that you're using to measure.
Yeah, it's significantly less. And so, that's the thing, right? If you're going to have your phone next to your head all day long and you're going to be sitting, a foot away from your Wi-Fi router and you're going to always be, the laptop, if I remember correctly, when I measure my laptop, it doesn't seem to transmit much EMF.
They are protected. They're shielded. So most of the time, the laptops are shielded enough that you don't get that much exposure. And the laptop is not really producing microwaves as much because the signaling inside it really is designed for lower frequency transmission. But because it's receiving wireless, it still has some of that signaling. And there's a little bit of amplification inside the laptop, but it's not as powerful as a big, like even the old TV screens.
So you can take
monitors, computer monitors.
Right. So you can take your phone and put it a couple feet away from you, or keep it away from your head.
If you keep it away from you, I think your level of exposure is minimal. But it's additive. So if you go outside and you're sitting next to a tower, that little bit of exposure for your phone is going to add to whatever exposure you have environmentally otherwise.
So what other concerns do you have, and that has been demonstrated clearly in peer-reviewed research about EMF specifically? We talked about damaging the cell. We talked about it damaging mitochondria. We talked about a potential link to cancer. I mean, even the, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's the WHO who classified Wi-Fi radiation as a possible 2 carcinogen. So they're already saying, hey, yeah, this is probably cancer causing. What else are you concerned about? What else has the research shown?
Well, again, the EMF is cumulative. And it's also additive because it causes inflammation, as you discussed. Inevitably, it causes inflammation, some levels of inflammation. So that's why anybody with an autoimmune disease, a hot autoimmune disease, is very active, and the immune system is really revved up with high sedimentation rates, high CRPs, high cytokine levels. So if you get COVID and you already have significant microwave exposure, you're adding another level of risk on top of a risk you already have. Or if you have magnetic field exposure, like Wi-Fi exposure, and you get an infection, then that infection may be worsened because of the additional inflammation that's being caused by the Wi-Fi around you. So it works both ways. In other words, these things add together. And that's why we want to be very careful with people with autoimmune diseases in particular, MCAS as well, mast cell activation syndrome, CIRS, all of these kind of inflammatory disorders are made worse with aggravation by Wi-Fi.
Inflammatory disorders, that's something to be concerned about. So I just want to show this just so I'm saying the right thing here. World Health Organization, they have, like I said, the WHO, this was in 2011. They say that radio frequency radiation was classified as a group 2B possible human carcinogen. Meaning they have enough evidence to support the fact that they believe it's most likely cancer causing. But when they say RF, right, radio frequency radiation, how is this different from? Yeah, talk about
radio frequency.
Radio frequency. Okay, but you were talking about what are like radio kilohertz versus like radio frequency kilohertz. You also call is Wi-Fi frequency you would also call radio frequency? It's the same thing?
Yes.
Okay.
They're at those radio frequency levels. So radio frequency levels probably begin at about 200 megahertz and above. Most of the time, what we're talking about is in the gigahertz range. So the shorter the wavelengths, the shorter the wavelengths and the stronger the signal, the more likelihood of harm there's going to be. Sunlight is as well. The farther you are from the sunlight, the exposure, and if you decrease the length of time that you're exposed, or if you wear shielding, if you wear clothing that's going to shield you from that radiation, then you don't get the damage. In medicine, we actually use radio frequency to burn tissue.
Right.
Warts, to burn aneurysms, to collections of blood vessels that may be likely to bleed, whether it's inside the brain or elsewhere in the body. So we actually actively use that technology to damage tissue that we want to be damaged. Again, warts.
Yeah.
Or even cancers in some cases.
Interesting way to look at it. Yeah, I mean, that's what radiotherapy is, right? I mean, radiation, you're basically blasting away the cancer cells and the healthy cells with, intense radiation.
That's correct. One is ionizing and one is not, but ionizing is really the key, is that it's ionizing, it increases the heat in the tissues, and that's what causes the destruction.
So, and it's also the ionizing radiation that is the main concern, right? Or is it non-ionizing?
Yes.
It's the ionizing that's the main concern.
It changes the ionic structures of the tissues and the bodies and the cells and organelles and so on.
Okay, so what about what are EMFs that are not a concern? Like some examples, like radio.
Pulse magnetic fields.
Pulsed electromagnetic fields, right? That's PEMF.
PEMF. So the reason is that the technology has a completely different design behind it. So cell phones, microwave towers, and so on are designed to produce these very tiny, tiny wavelengths. And they're transmitting towers. So basically, we call that open loop. So technologically speaking, it's open loop. It's just broadcast into the environment. It does not come back to the source. Pulsed magnetic fields, on the other hand, are designed by, say, devices that produce current that is then pulsed at a specific rate. And that current, a magnetic field, then is caused by the flow of current in the wire. So it's localized to the wire. And my thumb is the flow of the current in the wire. And so that current pulses, right, at the rate of 50 cycles per second, or 100 cycles, or 60 cycles per second. In the US, it's 50. In Europe, it's 50. In the US, it's 60. So when that pulse, every time that pulse goes by in that wire, a magnetic field is produced. And that's a common law. It's called the inverse. It's called the right-hand rule. So the magnetic field is produced, Maxwell's equations. So what happens is the magnetic field is produced as the current goes by, and it comes back. Goes up and down, in and out, essentially, in and out. And it's 360 degrees around that wire. So that pulse of magnetic field then is designed to effectively go through the body or into the body to do various actions in the body. Similar kinds of actions to radiation, to ionizing radiation, and even the microwave ovens or microwave fields. But because the wavelengths or the pulses are so long, they go in and out. They do not stay in the body. They go through the body completely. So all of these machines that are PEMFs, essentially, I would say almost all of them, depending on the pulse rates, are essentially going through the body. They don't stay in the body. And they go in and out. They come back and forth. So as that pulse goes through, the magnetic field goes out and goes into the body, and then collapses back down to the source. So that's called a closed loop system. It always comes back to neutral. Okay? It doesn't go on out. It doesn't keep going. So it's controlled. It's a controlled form of exposure to a magnetic field.
Now, what does that mean for people? Why is that important? Why is that an important distinction? How does that show up in the body?
Because it has less risk, and it's not a frequency per se. So this is a major source of confusion for people. Microwaves are a frequency. They're more like a wave in a pond or a wave in the ocean. It just keeps on going. Now, it may hit a shore, in which case it extinguishes. Whereas the pulse magnetic field just goes back and forth. It does not keep going. And that's important because then it means it's not absorbed by the body.
So do you see PEMFs, pulse electromagnetic frequencies, anywhere in nature?
Yeah, that's a good one. I'm having a hard time thinking of something that's not electric. So possibly eels. But the magnetic fields, the currents produced by eels are what we call DC current. It's a steady current. It's not a pulsing current. It's not going in and out, in and out. So I can't think of anything in nature that does it just automatically come to mind.
What about the Earth itself? I think according to the Space Foundation, they talk about how the Earth projects like a natural PEMF field.
All right. So there's two kinds of magnetic fields. There's time varying. That was like we just mentioned. They just move in and out. So microwaves are time varying. Pulse magnetic fields are time varying. So they vary over time. A fridge magnet is a static magnetic field, or it's a permanent magnetic field. It's not moving. It's not time varying. So the Earth's magnetic field is a constant field. There's a little bit of vibration and shrinkage and expansion of it, but it's really not truly a pulsed magnetic field. It's more of a direct current. It's there. It's steadily there. It's like a fridge magnet. It's made and it just stays that way.
And that's been shown to actually be incredibly beneficial to our health, especially, with the research on grounding and earthing. Anytime you can get yourself connected into nature, whether it's barefoot on the grass, outside in a forest, connecting to this natural frequency that the Earth is putting off. There's some interesting science showing how it basically has an antioxidant effect at a cellular level, how it helps reduce inflammation. I sleep on a grounded, earthing bed sheet. I have a grounded pad under where I work at my computer that's grounded, and I stand on it barefoot. And I've actually measured it where I'm standing on it. I'm measuring my electrical field, and it goes down significantly. I step, 1 inch off of it, get my feet off of the grounded mat, and the electrical field goes up significantly. So I've tested that, and it clearly works. It clearly, connects you, grounds you to that, what you could call, a healing frequency that the Earth is constantly transmitting, which you're saying is more like a DC current.
That's not true.
No.
There's a lot of confusion around that, actually, Nathan.
Okay. What's the confusing part?
The Earth's magnetic field is static.
Mm-hmm.
It's not moving. Okay, when we're talking about earthing, we're talking about telluric currents. They're called telluric currents. There are electrical currents that are flowing on the surface of the planet. They're electrical. They're not magnetic. And they're DC currents. They're just constantly flowing. So what happens then is that as we see this with bracelets, same concept. You wear a copper bracelet. What's the copper bracelet doing for you? The copper ions in the copper is interacting with the basically the fluid in the skin, the electrolytes in the skin, the sweat in the skin. And then there's a dielectric caused by that. There's a change in electric current between the two. There's an exchange. We have to coat our pipelines with material that it makes the pipeline inert. If you have a pipeline exposed to the earth, there's a dielectric caused by that. When you touch a spoon to a filling, you get a shock. That's a dielectric. Right? So the Earth's currents, the telluric currents, interact with the body's fluids and the ions in the body to create an electrical exchange. It's an electrical phenomenon. It's not a magnetic phenomenon.
Okay, so it's electrical phenomenon when you're barefoot on the Earth, for example. The natural antioxidants that you're basically receiving is due to the electrical current.
electrical current.
These
And
are
that
these
electrical
are
current,
ion. These are basically negative ions that the body receives from the
well,
electrical
they're
current of the
both,
earth.
because
Is that
actually
right?
there's a positive pole and a negative pole, so it's flowing in one direction typically. So as long
Mm.
as there's flow, and that's electrical flow, then it influences the tissues of the body, which are electrically sensitive.
Now, would you agree that that is a healing response that you receive? It's more healing and regenerative versus, deleterious and degenerative.
Yeah, so the difference is that that's a passive system and it's very low intensity. It's extremely low intensity. So it's not likely to heal because it doesn't penetrate the body deeply. So we have a problem, for example, with electrical stimulation. Transcutaneous electrical stimulation, TENS machines, or electrical stim in general, does not penetrate the body very deep at all. In order to penetrate the body deeply, you have to electrocute the body. And then you're burning tissue because it's the electrical stimulation. So it's a very different phenomenon in the body. The acupuncture system of the body is a DC current system. So when you're laying on the ground and you're interacting, the tissues are interacting with the electrical flow of the natural earth itself and the flows of currents in the body, then those are all amplified. And that's part of the earthing process. The earthing process then basically increases the flow and the charge and the amount of energy production in the acupuncture system. That's one of the reasons people feel so much better, is because of the acupuncture system. Not because it's directly affecting the cells and tissues. I learned magnetic field therapy after I studied acupuncture. So I wanted to be able to do acupuncture to help people with pain. And people did not want to do needles. That was 1990. They said, what's acupuncture? So they want, stay away from me with those needles. I said, what can I do instead of acupuncture with needles? Having spent 2 years of training doing this, now I can't use it because people don't understand it and don't want it. I said, well, let me try something else. So I discovered magnets. So in the Orient, they were putting magnets on acupuncture points. And lo and behold, it worked. Well, why do magnets work on an acupuncture point? Because it's a static magnet. It's not a dynamic magnet, it's static. It's because the current in the body is interacting with the magnetic field in the static magnet. So if I put a magnet here and the current's flowing past it, then you get an exchange of energy. Right? So the magnets that are amplifying the flow of the current in the DC current system of the acupuncture points and meridians. So acupuncture points are capacitors. They take the very low level current that's flowing in there, increase it, and pass it on to the next acupuncture point. So that whole system is basically just going like this all day long. The 12-hour circulation system.
So what exactly are the acupuncture points? How does it pass? What exactly are the acupuncture points, and how does the magnets, for example, help send signals to each point on the body?
So acupuncture points are a change in current in the tissue locally. So basically, it's a conjunction of the blood vessels and the nerves in one spot, which creates essentially a vortex. And so you have increased energy at the center of that vortex, and it gradually reduces as you move away from it.
Say it again. So what is it? What is it that exactly creates the vortex, the energy vortex?
It's basically the ions and the electrical fields created by the tissues, which have a certain concentration and a certain focus. It's extremely low level, but it's enough with a whole body system to be able to still produce an influence on the acupuncture points and meridians. I mean, this whole discussion about acupuncture points, there's a lot of debate about what an acupuncture point is. But basically, it's a low-level current system. There's like a sink. So when you put a needle in this sink, an acupuncture needle in the sink, you're creating what's called the current of injury, which is increasing the current in that acupuncture point. It's amping it up. It's creating a vortex, an energy vortex. And that builds up, and then it sends the signal on to the next acupuncture point along that meridian.
Now, has this been verified scientifically where each of these points is on the body?
Yes.
And you can measure that this area has more, would it be accurate to say electromagnetic frequency in that area, or what would you say?
It's a change in electrical potentials in that spot. So there are devices that our acupuncturists use actually that they can actually measure right over that spot. So if you pass this little probe along the skin, along the tissue, you can see that there's a big drop in energy at that spot.
So the amount of energy actually decreases in that vortex.
In that vortex, but it builds up over time. So if you pass more energy along the meridian, then all of a sudden this sink activates.
It activates by using the magnets, or by putting
flowing in the circuit,
or putting the needles in, or maybe even something like qigong, energy healing, for example. Maybe that can
anything
stimulate
that increases the energy.
Increases the energy in the vortex area, which is also known as an acupuncture.
Vortex, or the point of the acupuncture point.
The meridian, the acupuncture point.
Right. I teach
fascinating. I've never heard it explained that way. That's super fascinating. What even blows my mind more, like it's interesting. It's like, oh yeah, we have scientific devices that can measure this stuff, which is cool. But what blows my mind more is how people figured this stuff out thousands of years ago in traditional Chinese medicine before they had instruments to measure this stuff.
Well, they do this. There was something called qi. And of course, you have sensitive people who can detect flows of energy and current. I've done studies on people with their auras. And I've used a dowsing rod, and I put somebody on a magnetic system. And then after they got off, I then tested their aura with a dowsing rod, and their aura expands dramatically. So that's the energy field of the body expands significantly when you expose that body to a magnetic field. It's charging the body. Yeah, and so they discovered the meridian system largely because of people who were very sensitive. And don't forget, 3,000 years ago, there was a lot less interference.
No cell phone towers back then.
No cell phones, no radio signals, right? Everything was quiet. And so people had a lot more sensitivity to their environments. And if you pass, so there are people obviously who do therapeutic touch or who do healing work, direct healing work, and they can pass their hands over a body and detect a cold area in the tissues. And they say, okay, that area needs help. It's supposed to be the same temperature as the rest of the body. And so they know then that's an area to focus their healing on. And that dowsing is the same principle. Finding water in the ground is the same principle. And they've done studies with magnetic fields where they change the panels. So they have dowsers walking past a series of panels that are magnetized or not magnetized and then randomly changed. And the dowsers could detect where the magnetic screens were every time.
And the dowsing, is it, for people who don't know dowsing, maybe you can explain a little bit. I actually spoke to a dowsing group in San Diego like 12 years ago. And have practiced a little bit of dowsing, and it's pretty fascinating actually. But that's traditionally how water was found for millennia, right? And it's been super, super accurate, where you literally can take two sticks even, or two pieces of metal rods or whatever, and you're walking and moving, and the rods are moving, and then when they cross, if you're really doing it accurately, it's like this is the spot where there's water. So why does that happen?
But it's actually not water, it's flowing water.
Flowing water, yeah.
And the water can't be flowing too fast, and it can't be still. So that's one of the reasons the dowsers have to go back and forth, because they're going in and out of the magnetic field. So when you or I walk into a magnetic field, our body, our sensory systems, and the sensory receptors in the skin notice it. But if we're moving too fast, we don't notice it because it's a millisecond. It's a thousandth of a second. It happens very rapidly, below our level of perception. But as we go into the field, so let's say the magnetic field is gradually increasing like this. But you're walking into that field. As you're walking in, the field is changing. And then when the top of the field is higher than your head, you're in the field. You don't notice any change anymore. So that's why you have to kind of go back and forth to scan and to basically do contrast detection in that field. And that's when you notice the electromagnetic differences. So the dowsers, what they're doing is that their sensory systems are detecting the changes in the magnetic field. And they have trained themselves to have small changes in their muscles, and the electrical systems of the muscles and the tissues of the body, and they can detect that difference.
Interesting. So the water is putting off a higher magnetic field then? Would that be accurate to say?
So it's a flow of water. So with the flow of water, there's a change in energy. So the electrical field of the water that is changing.
Yep.
And the body's electrical, just like earthing. Then the water potentials are interacting with the potentials in the body then to create a sensation of change.
So are you a fan of earthing specifically?
I would say if I had to choose between a pulse magnetic field system for a problem and earthing, I would choose the magnetic field. And the reason why, I agree with you that a static magnetic field on the bed doing earthing is going to have a benefit. Earthing had more benefit in the timeline of humanity where we didn't have all these extraneous influences, because it's a very, very weak stimulus to the body. So when acupuncture, we do needles, but we also do electroacupuncture. Electroacupuncture gets results much better, much faster, much stronger. So you're amping up the total amount of charge. So earthing is better than nothing. And when we were, living on the land and laying on the ground and walking barefoot on the ground, we were constantly amping up the body. Yeah. We have so many interferences now that they drown out the benefit that you're getting from the earthing itself, for the most part. Now, given what earthing does to you, which is to amp up the energy in the body, if you do magnetic field therapy, you're amping that up thousands more fold. It's a much more dramatic increase in the amount of energy production in the body. So when you're dealing with diseases, you're dealing with important health conditions, earthing is not enough. It won't solve it well enough because it doesn't go deep enough into the body to do the work. And that's the key, is it doesn't go deep into the body. It's stimulating the acupuncture system. So it's rebalancing the acupuncture system, which is a good thing, but it's not healing tissue. This is one of the reasons I stopped doing acupuncture. When I discovered magnetic field therapy, I discovered magnetic field therapy healed the tissue. Acupuncture didn't heal the tissue. So if I had a cut, I could do acupuncture around the cut. It's not going to heal it anywhere near as fast as doing a magnetic field over the cut. Dramatically difference in the rate of healing. And then when you're talking about going deep into the body, we're talking about going deep into a brain or into a heart or a liver or the gut, the entire volume of the gut. And you need stronger magnetic fields to go deeper, because they lose their intensity with distance. So you have to account for that distance. So pulse magnetic, the answer to your question then basically goes back to, I think grounding and earthing is effective, but it's not good enough.
If you're dealing with a chronic,
and when you're dealing with aging, I don't think grounding is adequate either, given the stressors that we live under.
So pulsed electromagnetic frequency, you're saying these PMF devices, they put out a frequency that is it goes
a magnetic field.
Magnetic field goes into the body and then comes back to the device. Goes into the body and goes back to the device. Number one, you're saying it doesn't actually absorb into the cells.
Right.
But number two, if it's not absorbing in the cells in any negative or positive way, then what's the benefit you're receiving from this particular frequency versus an EMF, like a radio wave frequency that's causing damage? How is a PMF device, frequency
since
beneficial?
It's not absorbed, then it's not absorbed, it's not going to cause harm. What happens is, what science has discovered is that as a magnetic field is passing through the body, it's interacting with the ions in the tissues, the electrolytes and the ions in the tissues. All cells, all components of cells have charge associated with them. They're ions. And so the more ionized the body is, the more it's going to interact with that magnetic field. So basically what we're doing is we're inducing charge in the body. That's based on Faraday's law. We're increasing the charge production in the body. As that magnetic field goes in, it's interacting with all those ions, it's stimulating them, and as it comes back out again, it's doing it back on the back way, on the way back. So it's much more dynamic in creating charge in the body. We did some Kirlian photography on a healthy guy. I don't know if people know about Kirlian photography. You're blasting the body with energy, and then you have a measurement tool to see how that energy has been absorbed by the body. A sick body doesn't absorb the energy as well. An inflamed body absorbs way too much. So we took this healthy person and we did this photography basically on the body, and he showed his aura. And then we treated him with a high intensity magnetic field, and then redid the testing. There was about a 20% increases in his energy in the body in a healthy person. So 20% doesn't sound like much, but let me ask you a question. How efficient is the body in converting fuel into work?
It depends on the type of fuel, but there is definitely a loss. There's definitely a loss in conversion of, carbohydrates, fat, protein into fuel. It's pretty efficient though.
Oh, it's actually very inefficient. I hate to dispute you. A car engine, an automobile engine
is
terribly,
about 20%. Yeah, terrible.
20% efficient.
Right.
The body is about 25% efficient.
From converting 25% efficient? Are you sure?
Yeah. That's what the research I read.
From converting like carbohydrates, fat, protein into fuel?
Into work, into muscle work.
Into muscle work. Okay, interesting. I mean, there's a lot of things that have to happen, right? There's a lot of things that the body requires biologically from, carbohydrates, fat, and protein, for example, it's not just muscle. I mean, there are so many different functions that are required.
Every cell in the body, every biochemical process in the cell relies on that fuel. So if the fuel could be oxygen, because you need to have oxygen to make ATP, right? But if you're burning calories, you're creating calories, you're burning something to create calories to do work, then this is where the body is not that efficient in converting fuel into work.
Gotcha.
Has the same losses of efficiency that an automobile engine does, or approximately there. I'm really giving this just really not to get the technical detail precise, because it's very hard to be precise for the reasons you mentioned. It has to do with the conditions of the body, it has to do with the amount of exposure, it has to do with just so many different factors. But the principle is the same, is that there's a significant loss of energy. So what the body needs is it needs more to be charged, essentially, to be more efficient. So PEMF therapy increases ATP production in the body by upwards of 400%. The magnetic field causes ATP to be produced by upwards of 400%. Now, every tissue is going to be different, every body is going to be different, but I'm saying up to about 400%.
That's huge.
So that is huge. And so to go back to that, the example I gave you, that guy with the Kirlian photography and his magnetic field significantly amplifying a generally healthy person. So all of a sudden he had an increase in energy. So if he went out and tried to run or weight lift or do some work with his body, whatever work he's doing, presumably muscle work, he's going to be doing it much better temporarily for a short period of time until that's exhausted. That increase in energy is exhausted.
So, what studies have you seen that show PMF increase ATP by up to, what'd you say, 400%, 500%?
400%.
400%.
Average is a lot less. But there was a paper that's actually published in my my book, Power Tools for Health. There's a section in there about one of the actions of magnetic fields, and there are about 25 to 27 different actions at least. But what I describe based on science is about 25. And one of those actions is increasing ATP. And that reference is in the book.
There's a reference that I'm looking up right now that talks about, apparently this was done by NASA and showed a 400% increase in stem cell activity after the use of PMF. Have you heard of that?
Yes, absolutely. That's a very important study. It's quoted frequently. So magnetic fields were done to a stem cell culture, a neural stem cell culture. And they exposed those cells to about a 200 Gauss magnetic field for 24 hours.
I think this is it for those watching. The effects of a pulse electromagnetic field on proliferation, osteogenic differentiation of human adipose-derived stem cells.
Yeah, that's not that study.
This is not that one?
But there's a lot like that, though.
Bone-related gene expression increased after 2 weeks of PMF exposure. Okay, so this was a different one that also showed increase in stem cells.
You have to look up You have to look up NASA and neural stem cells.
Yeah, I was looking for that one, but I didn't find the actual study. Just articles about it. NASA and neural stem cells.
The author's name is Goodwin. There it is.
Present investigation details the development of model systems for growing 2- and 3-dimensional human neural progenitor cells within a culture medium facilitated by time-varying electromagnetic field. Time-varying, is that different than pulsed electromagnetic?
No, that's what we're talking about, pulsed. Time-varying.
Same thing. Okay, gotcha. Okay, I'd have to read the whole paper, but this is one that you're basically saying
from 2.5 to 4 times.
Yeah, up to 400% increased the stem cells by up to 250% to 400% the rate of the non-waveform cells.
Well, the waveform being the pulsed magnetic field,
which measured more than 10,000.
And what they found is actually there was a significant increase, up to 600% approximately, or maybe even more, of growth factors. About 160 growth factors were turned on by the magnetic fields, which then contributed to the growth of those stem cells, those neural stem cells.
Which is pretty fascinating, because anything that can stimulate, our stem cells, generally can be a good thing for health, for regenerating tissue and so forth. I mean, you also have cancer. You also have cancer stem cells you have to be concerned about. And I don't know if
you don't actually.
Not with PMF.
You don't really, because of the environment the cancer stem cells are in. So it's a bunch of different factors that coordinate those stem cells. In fact, actually, this is one of the things we want to talk about with cancer. Is PMF therapy is very, very important for cancer, because it basically decreases the production or the stimulation or the activation of those quiescent stem cells that are in our bones. So if you decrease inflammation, you increase oxygenation in that environment, that tumor microenvironment, then you turn off those stem cells.
Here's a paper that says PMFs. So this one's called Signaling Pathways Involved in Anti-Inflammatory Effects of Pulsed Electromagnetic Field in Microglial Cells. So here, I'll share my screen.
Microglial cells is the brain cells.
Blocks neuroinflammation, reduces the production of pro-inflammatory cytokines, decreases reactive oxygen species, diminishes cell invasion and phagocytosis in microglial cells. That's powerful.
That's in my book, Power Tools for Health. I have 600 references that discuss approximately 25 actions of magnetic fields in the body.
Okay, so pulse electromagnetic frequencies. There's obviously a lot of research on them that they can be very beneficial from a health perspective. Now, does it matter what the frequency is, the intensity of the PEMF?
Okay, I think you're doing something that a lot of people do, which is to confuse the difference between frequency and intensity. And pulsed PEMFs is not pulsed electromagnetic frequencies, it's pulsed electromagnetic fields. This is a very common sort of misuse of the terminology. I understandably so. I've only been doing this with magnetic fields for 30 years. So I better know more. Very long. Better know more than you about it.
You don't have that much experience, yeah. 30 years, yeah.
What's 30 years?
Yeah. No, you know your stuff. Okay, so F is for field, and the difference between fields and frequencies is.
Okay, so a frequency is again a pulsation. So you can have the waveform, which is hertz, right? Or you can, and many people often use pulsations or pulsed fields synonymously with hertz, which it can be misleading and confusing. Right? So a waveform is a hertz. A pulse will have a peak and a valley. So many people then still use the word hertz because it goes peak to peak. But a pulse basically is very different. So frequency then relates to the pulsation rate, and intensity determines the strength of the magnetic field, the power of the magnetic field. So a weak light has a low strength or intensity. A strong light has higher intensity. The same thing with wind and cold and heat. So the colder it is, the more power there is in that cold, etc. So the intensity of the magnetic field is Gauss, Gauss, or Tesla or millitesla. So let's use Gauss. So that's the intensity of the magnetic field. And that's critical because Faraday's law, which is the critical law relative to what magnetic fields are doing. Faraday's law says that the rise time of the pulse of the magnetic field, the height of that magnetic field, and the time that it takes to get from zero to peak is critical. That's called dB/dt. So that means that the higher the pulse and the faster it pulses, produces more energy in the body.
And that's what you want. You want more energy production in the body, right? That's what we're going for.
You want more energy in the body because that's what induces the electrical fields in the body that do all the work that magnetic fields do in the body, or that the body does in response to the magnetic field.
So the higher Gauss or the higher intensity of the magnetic fields is actually better.
Typically. And I'll give you an example. I have a blog on my website about adenosine. You know adenosine. You like adenosine.
Mm-hmm.
Adenosine is the basis of the root molecule for making adenosine triphosphate, which is ATP. Well, the body has adenosine receptors. And those adenosine receptors are responsible for dealing with inflammation. So the magnetic field stimulates adenosine receptors. It stimulates the production of adenosine, stimulates the attachment of the adenosine to these receptors for it, and therefore helps with inflammation. Research has found that the optimal magnetic field strength, intensity, for stimulating the adenosine receptor is 15 Gauss, 1.5 millitesla or 15 Gauss. So there you go. So you have a statement that says you need a certain level of intensity to have the optimal level of stimulation of adenosine receptors. And where are those adenosine receptors? On white blood cells. And where are the white blood cells?
Everywhere.
Every time you do it in the body. So every time you're doing magnetic field therapy, you're activating adenosine receptors. So even a weak magnetic field will do that too, but the optimal magnetic field is 1.5 millitesla or 15 Gauss. So if you have a magnetic device that's less than that, you're getting almost nothing from a benefit perspective. The other problem is the problem that we discussed before with microwaves. It's not a problem, actually. The good thing about microwaves is most of the time they're weak, unless you're next to a tower. But they drop off according to something called the inverse square law. And we use that law in medicine to calculate the dose of radiation into the body. If we're going to use radiation, we have to calculate the dose that we're trying to deliver into the body. If you're trying to deliver radiation to the skin, you don't need as much. If you're trying to deliver radiation deep into a lung or into a heart or into a brain, then you need a much higher strength magnetic field. And that's calculated according to the inverse square law. So what happens then is that if the magnetic field starts at, say, 15 Gauss, then basically maybe about half an inch into the body, it's all gone. You're down to almost zero. If you want to stimulate across a brain to deliver 15 Gauss to decrease neuroinflammation across a brain, from one side of the brain to the other, you're going to need 4,000 Gauss.
That's a huge difference.
That's a huge difference. So I mentioned some time ago that 1,000 Gauss magnetic field will drop off to basically lose 3/4 of its intensity in 1 centimeter.
In 1 centimeter. Okay, that's why. So it loses 3/4 of its intensity in 1 centimeter. Now, okay, that's why you need 4,000 to go from one side of the brain to the other. Now, is there a concern about projecting 4,000 or transmitting 4,000 Gauss in those immediate cells within that first inch of the brain, just so you can get 15 Gauss at the other end or whatever that number ends up being? Right. Yeah.
So the good thing is healthy cells ignore the magnetic field.
How do we know that?
hundreds of thousands of cases of use of magnetic fields. Most of the research that we've looked at shows that there's no harm or damage. A study done at University of Virginia took a magnetic field and exposed it to the brachial artery, and they used sophisticated ultrasound equipment to look at the dilation and the contraction of that brachial artery. And they found within a microsecond, a millionth of a second, that blood vessel dilated, and almost as fast it constricted. It went in the opposite direction, constricted, and then almost as fast it went back to normal, to neutral. So the magnetic fields will cause the body to react to it, but they don't keep reacting to it. Only basically where you have pathology that's stuck, healing is stuck, that you have emotion that continues to work at that tissue. So it'll work for a longer period of time. Normal cells basically ignore the magnetic field. They say, well, this is very interesting. So even the higher intensity magnetic field basically gets shrugged off by the body.
How much Gauss was that study used on the artery? Do you know?
Yes, I think it was probably around 25 or 50 Gauss.
Oh, so not 4,000 though.
It wasn't 4,000.
Do we have studies at
okay.
that high of a level? 4,000
All right. Well,
Gauss?
let me give you a place to look for studies. Have you heard of RTMS?
I'm not sure.
Okay, R stands for repetitive. TMS is transcranial magnetic stimulation.
Okay, yes, I have.
Okay, that's FDA approved to treat treatment-resistant depression and OCD and some other neurological disorders. So they use a 20,000 Gauss magnetic field to the brain. Millions of people have been treated. Almost no side effects. Almost no risk. So that's a lot more field than you need for the kinds of things we're talking about. And even that's been found to be extraordinarily safe. Now, there are guidelines around using it properly, but other than that, if you follow the guidelines, there's really no really significant risk associated with it, which is truly amazing, actually.
And so I just looked up some common side effects of RTMS. They're saying a transient headache that usually responds to simple analgesics, local discomfort.
Emphasis is transient.
Yeah, they go away. Local discomfort in the stimulation area, dizziness, very rarely generalized seizure.
And the seizures probably happen. Some of the research shows that seizures probably happen because they were ready to have a seizure anyway.
This is at 20,000 Gauss is what they're using this for,
Right,
and,
yes,
and it helps with depression, is what you said.
Yep. Yep.
And it talks about their pain going down after the intervention as well. So that's another thing I've seen in the PMF research is for pain. I know you have a lot of experience with that. So yeah, what are the things that you see with pulse electromagnetic frequencies? And these are, just so people know, these are devices that you can actually use at home that transmit these frequencies. That transmit, I'm sorry. Now I'm gonna say the right words, thanks to you, to transmit the magnetic fields, the electromagnetic fields into our bodies that are responsible for helping reduce inflammation and so forth, activate the electrical, increase the charge in our bodies, which, as we've already shown, helps increase ATP production, which is essential for basically every biological function in the body. That's the energy. So, so that's a good thing. But how does it help people with pain, for example?
Okay, there are several mechanisms. And so the question always becomes, what causes the pain? And magnetic field therapy has actually been found even in snails to reduce the pain signal by itself. Just like we call that, there's a term for it. I'm blocking on it for a second, but basically the pain signal itself. So what happened is with snails, they would put snails on a hot plate, and they'd measure how quickly the snail would get off the hot plate, and they varied the temperature of the hot plate. So what they did is they did morphine, and they gave snails injections of morphine, tiny little injections, obviously. And they measured how long it took the snails to get off the plates. So they measured how much morphine you had to give a snail and how long it would take the snail to get off. And obviously, if the snail didn't get off, the snail got cooked.
That sounds like a torture device. Oh my God, that sounds terrible. Especially you're a snail and you can't move very fast.
Well,
Are you kidding me?
if you're eating snails, yes, you're right.
I don't eat snails. Poor snails.
Oh, you haven't been to Montreal, I suppose.
No, I don't eat animals, but that's all right.
Or-
So all right, so this test, so
parrot.
they're measuring to give it a morphine. Okay.
And it has a natural anti-nociceptive. So that's the term, nociceptive. So nociception is the sensation of pain. Anti-nociceptive is the lack of sensation of a pain or blocking the sensation of pain. So it's a natural pain-killing action by itself, as if you gave somebody codeine or morphine or ibuprofen or Tylenol, right? That has a natural pain-killing effect. But the pain comes back if you don't heal the cause. Right? So the goal then with magnetic field therapy is to heal the cause. So you get the natural pain-killing effect anyway, but you really want to heal the cause. And so what's the cause of pain? Most of the time it's due to inflammation. So an injury is inflammation for the most part. And if you have basically a needle in your hand, then that's going to cause pain from the injury to the tissues. And then almost immediately get a reaction of inflammation. Right? So the magnetic field therapy decreases the inflammation. So you keep applying the magnetic field, then the inflammation goes down. I'll tell you an anecdote, a story. My wife broke her little toe, right? Hitting lawn furniture. So it was bent out. Black and blue, swollen, painful. Yeah, right? You should have that, right? That should be what happened when you break your toe like that. How long does it take to heal a broken toe?
No idea.
5 to 6
5 weeks, 6 weeks?
Yeah, 5 to 6 weeks. So we did a magnetic field to her, put it right on right after she did that. I kept it on for 24 hours. It was a 200 Gauss magnetic field. Kept it on from that mid-afternoon till the following morning. Following morning, no pain, no swelling, no bruising, all gone.
Wow.
Did it another 24 hours, walked a mile in tennis shoes. Did it another 24 hours, walked 3 miles in tennis shoes. And that was it. That was the end of her treatment.
All right, I need to do that. I need to do that for my knee. My knee's been bothering me for weeks, actually months now, and I need it healed.
Yes, pulse magnetic fields will take care of the causes, which is usually chronic inflammatory.
Yeah, my bone is definitely, inflamed, damaged. It's the bone is what it is. It's something going on with the bone.
And it could be the ligaments that are attached to the bone. They're causing the bone to be stressed, and you can have bone marrow edema, all that going on. Magnetic fields, that's a no-brainer.
Really?
One of the earliest
what kind of Gauss, what level of Gauss would you need for something like that? That's, the first inch
for a
of
local
the leg?
problem right there. Now, if it's deeper into the knee, you need a lot more. But if it's just right there at the top of the knee, essentially at the edge of the knee, then, and that's common. Bone marrow edema is often very, very superficial. So a 200 Gauss magnetic field would be adequate. And you basically just wear it continuously until basically the pain goes away.
Now, is it actually, so is it heal? So you've already talked about how it does reduce the inflammation. We know that actually, if you research pain signals in the body, right, where scientists used to believe, and a lot of people still believe, it's a local issue. It's the tissue itself that is where you're getting, the pain notification from. But it's actually, as you talked about, the nociceptors. It is communication, electrical communication back and forth to the brain that's telling you, hey, there's a problem here, there's pain. And oftentimes you may have chronic pain, even though the entire area has healed. But
absolutely,
that connection, that electrical connection, the information hasn't actually, I don't know how to say it, updated, if you will, like a computer, to say,
needs to be reset.
Needs to be reset, rebooted. So your brain's like, okay, that area is actually fine now. It's totally healed, but you can still have chronic pain there until you kind of reset those nociceptors.
I call that the chronic pain brain. So chronic pain causes resetting of the brain receptors, the limbic system, the hypothalamus, the hippocampus, all of these areas of the brain that basically take that information, the pain information, they're trying to dampen it. They're trying not to have that pain. So they begin to change themselves. And over time, chronic pain actually causes remodeling of the tissues of the brain, which then promulgates and continues and reinforces and keeps up the pain signal. So yes, so you can treat chronic pain locally. Obviously, if it's still a problem locally, you should treat it locally. If you treat it locally and the problem goes away, you're okay. If you treat it locally and there's no more inflammation there, then you should be treating the brain.
Which, okay, that's a discussion for another time. I want to stay on the PMF conversation because it's very interesting. So
I use PMFs for that purpose, in fact, for the brain.
For helping
for
reset.
Chronic pain brain.
And how does that work?
Because it's not invasive. It's not risky. It's safe. As I mentioned, you could do 20,000 gauss to the brain with virtually no reactions, and certainly no longer term harm. It works very, very well. In fact, there are studies about TMS. If you go online and look up studies on TMS and chronic pain, there are studies that show there's significant benefit treating the brain for chronic pain. A lot better than narcotics.
So does it work for all kinds of pain, all kinds of physical issues, from bones to ligaments to joint, muscles, everything?
Well, obviously, different tissues heal at different rates. Ligaments and tendons don't have great blood supply. There's a lot of inflammation associated with a ligament or tendon. So first of all, a ligament or a tendon or any part of the body that's having pain, it's about the nerves in the area of the pain.
Yeah.
The nerves that are irritated and inflamed and involved, because that's what's stimulating, that's causing the signals to go to the brain. So if you quiet down the nerves, you quiet down the pain. So our goal then is to get the nerves quieted down. Now, highly inflamed nerves, they're really, really on edge. You just barely touch them and they're going to fire off like crazy. You have to go low and slow. You have to gradually tease out the inflammation, gradually reduce the inflammation, because you don't want to overwhelm those pain centers, the pain signals, or the nerve fibers. So you have to go low and slow. That's the biggest risk with magnetic field therapy, is doing too much too fast. And on my website, I have a blog about going low and slow. So you have to sort of let your body teach you or tell you how fast you can use it and how strong you can have it. And as the healing happens, the pain signal goes away. And it stays away if you've completely healed the problem. What happens, people often stop doing the treatments when they feel no more pain. But that doesn't mean the inflammation's all gone. It doesn't mean the tissues have been healed. So we usually stop magnetic field therapy too soon for most people.
How would you know if it's too soon? How do you know when to stop it?
Well, what do athletes do? You go to a trainer and you get treatment, right? And then the trainer and you say, okay, I think let's try you. Let's test you. So you test, there's no pain, then you keep testing, keep pushing the testing. So you finally reach a threshold that says, okay, now we better stop. And then we know we have to do more treatment, or we change the treatment protocols. So eventually, as you test to the maximum, let's say you have a goal of jumping over a high bar or high jumping. Well, if you can't do that, then you're not ready yet. So if you can finally do that, probably you're ready.
Okay, so
basically you test. You listen to the body's going to tell you.
Gotcha. Yeah, which is common physical therapy, protocols.
Exactly.
If you start, let's say you start with 10-pound dumbbells, hey, no pain. You go to 20-pound, hey, no pain. You go to 30-pound, all of a sudden you got level 1 pain. You're like, okay, let's pay attention. You go to 40-pound, you got a level 4 pain. You're like, okay, that's too much, right? Kind of general physical therapy protocols is you can do physical therapy up to about a level 3 pain, and that's obviously different for every person. But once you go beyond that, then you might be causing more harm than good. So you're going to test slowly and see if that pain actually has completely gone away as you increase different movements, or if it starts to show up again.
Absolutely. And I used to do that in the practice. Somebody come to me with a shoulder problem or a hip problem, I would take a magnetic coil, the high intensity magnetic system, and put the coil over the joint or over the area. And then I tell them, I'm going to increase the intensity of the magnetic field until you tell me it's uncomfortable. Okay, then that's our baseline. No pain, no gain. A little bit of discomfort is not a problem. Then I say, okay, now I'm going to crank this up until you tell me that you can't tolerate it. So then I have a framework. between discomfort and intolerance. So I want to be treating above discomfort, but below intolerance. Because if you do that, then you're going to do it faster. It's going to help, work faster for you.
So someone like my case, you said I should just have something like a 400 Gauss.
200 Gauss machine, yes.
Gauss. 200 Gauss machine on my knee, like basically 24 hours a day.
You could do that for the first few days, and then
how would I do that? Like, what would that device look like? How would that work? Like, I just put it in my pocket.
It's called a flex pulse. So FLEXPULSE.
I think I have one of those.
You have one?
I think I have one.
I think you do. All right, so you take a flex pulse coil and you put it right over that spot. Wrap your knee with an ace bandage or a knee wrap, and just put it on. And what I normally do is I advise people just wear it all night. And if it's not working wearing it all night, then you may have to wear it throughout the day. So you could wear it 24 hours with no problems. And then do that for a few days, really get the inflammation cranked down, and then basically you could then just do it less frequently.
I'll have to find it. What is? I know there's multiple settings. Like, what setting would you use for something
Maximum
like that?
intensity. So for you, Nathan Crane, because I think Nathan Crane is a masochist.
I'm not a masochist. I do push through pain. See, I don't like pain, right? It's not like I seek pain, but I will push through it forever until like.
You're a masochist.
That's not masochist. Is like someone who actually enjoys the pain, right?
It doesn't matter. You're a masochist if you lift that much weight.
Yeah, but lifting that much weight isn't painful. It's rewarding because you do something that's really challenging.
No, it is painful. You had pain on the way up.
No, it wasn't pain. That's challenge. Challenge is different than pain. But now the masochist part does kick in when, I'm squatting and my knee is hurting and I'm like, well, it'll go away. And I just keep squatting for months until it gets to a point where like I can't even do an air squat, with body weight without it significantly hurting. And then I go, okay, now I got to back off for weeks or months because I pushed myself stupidly through the pain for too long. And now it's become a serious problem. I guess that's part of the masochist part. That's the David Goggins mentality I've kind of had most of my life, where it's like, yeah, it'll just go away. I'm going to keep going, You're
a masochist.
But I don't seek the pain, but I don't run away from it either. So I don't.
You're a masochist.
Okay, if you say so.
if you are willing to do the activity and you have the pain, then you're a masochist. Now there are degrees of masochism, right?
No, I'm reading masochist, a person who derives sexual gratification from their own pain or humiliation. That is definitely not me. There's no sexual gratification.
There's other nuances to that.
All right. In general use, a person who enjoys an activity that appears to be painful or tedious. Now, is it enjoying the activity that's painful or tedious, or is it enjoying? See, I enjoy the result and the feeling afterwards. Okay. So,
which doesn't take away from you being a masochist.
Okay. Because I know that pushing myself through cold water, like I don't enjoy ice baths in the morning. I enjoy knowing how it's helping me physiologically, how it's giving me more energy throughout the day, how it's increasing my testosterone when I work out after. I enjoy the benefits I get from it, but I don't ever look forward to getting into the ice bath.
Okay. So there's risk and reward, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You're always weighing risk and reward. So to you, pain is not enough risk for the reward you're getting.
Right.
You're balancing the two.
Yeah.
But because you're willing to take the risk, that's masochism.
Well, you have to. If you don't take any risk at all to go through a challenging time, then you're never going to grow. That's how we progress.
I know, but it doesn't take away from the definition of masochism.
Oh, I don't know.
Do the activity if you weren't willing.
A person who enjoys an activity, I don't enjoy ice baths ever. That's not true though. I will say there is, I don't know. I can get to a place where I can calm my nervous system and then I'm relaxed, and then it's like, okay, this is tolerable. I can't say there's joy in it though. And it's funny, I'll do a really hard CrossFit workout, get to the point where you push yourself so hard, breathing, sweating, laying on the ground, feeling dead. And I'll take a huge, big, deep breath and kind of gather energy into my body. And then all of a sudden I feel amazing. And then as I was dying in the workout and hating it and feeling terrible, 5 minutes later, I'm talking with everybody, man, what an amazing workout. That was great. That was so awesome that, they're like, oh, that was so hard and terrible. I'm like, what a terribly awesome workout. And they're just like, man, it's a difference in perspective. It's a difference in perspective.
I totally agree. You're not going to get a disagreement from me on that. The key is that magnetic field therapy can increase your tolerance.
Interesting. Well, I need that. More tolerance.
You may increase your tolerance. You may increase your tolerance beyond a point of tissue damage.
Meaning what?
So in other words, you may do more activity. I'll give you an example. I had a hockey goalie who lost his college scholarship due to a groin injury. He treated in conventional physical therapy for 2 years. Didn't get very good results. We got him a portable PMF system like the one that I use on my wife for her toe, and the one that I would recommend for you. In other words, your flexibles. So he used that. He got it. He used it 24/7 for about 2 weeks. Completely gone. And he said, aha, I'm ready. And he went back and he dove right into exercise, like crazy, to make up for all the lost time. And he re-injured himself. Yeah. Worse than he was before he started the magnetic therapy.
So you got to be careful then.
So just because you feel that you're okay, your tissues will tell you we're okay. But once you start healing, the wonderful thing about magnetic therapy is not a matter of perception. That's important too. But it's a matter of what's going on in the tissues. And the only way you find out what's going on in the tissues is to stress the tissue, right? We talked about that. So what happens then is that magnetic field therapy may allow you to do more than you should. And I see this routinely. People go back out and they re-injure because they've gone too much, too fast, too soon. So we have to understand physiology and how the healing process in physiology happens and what timelines it takes. Ligaments don't heal as well as bone. Skin heals much better. Muscle heals much better. Brain and nerve cells take a lot longer to heal. So I call that healing timeline. On my website in the education, we have a healing timeline. And it'll tell you what different tissues do and how long different tissues take to heal. Nerves are pretty bad at healing.
So I'm looking at the Flex Pulse. It says 3 hertz up to 1,000 hertz. So for an injury or frequency. So is that what I use, 1,000 hertz?
No. You use a intensity 10.
Yeah, 10. It says program 10.
Maximum intensity.
It says program 10 is 1,000 hertz.
No, so yeah, don't worry about hertz. Again, we are not talking about frequency. We're talking about intensity. So the intensity that works best at the pulse rate that you have is about 10 hertz. So that's program 3.
Alpha brainwave frequency band.
That's when you're treating the brain or how the nervous system reacts to that particular pulse rate.
So no matter what the pulse rate is of the hertz, it's still putting out 200 Gauss.
Pretty well, more or less. But so the higher the frequency goes, the lower the pulse rate, because it takes so much time for the electronics to produce the magnetic field intensity. And if it takes 10 seconds to go to 0 to the max, but you're pulsing at a rate that's faster than 10 seconds, then it's not going to reach the maximum intensity. So there's a trade-off between frequency and intensity. So I usually recommend program 3 for musculoskeletal problems, program 3 or program 9. Most of the time, program 3. And then you do that at the maximum intensity.
And that would be good for bone, tendon, ligament, muscles.
Skin, muscles, ligaments, tendons, yes.
Is this your website?
Yes.
Flexpulse.com? Okay. Okay, so 3. So program 3. Yeah, I got to find it. I know I have one somewhere. I don't know where it's at, though. We moved in the last couple of years, and I have no idea.
Things get lost, and it's a small little machine, so it's easy enough to...
I have an idea of where it's at, though, but hopefully I can find it. So this device can help with basically everything we've been talking about. Is that what you're saying?
To a point. So
200
again, it depends on the depth of the problem. So if you've got a brain injury, right. right? So because if your maximum magnetic field is 200 Gauss, then your field is going to drop down to, let's say 200 Gauss will drop down to about 15 Gauss at about an inch.
It's because it loses 75% in the first centimeter.
Yep.
Now, is that still beneficial though? I mean,
yes, I mean, it's better than zero, right? It's not optimal. And if it's not optimal, then often it just takes more treatment time. So if you have the right intensity or more, then you're going to get the results better faster.
So if I have a bicep tendon, which is tendinosis, which is inflamed, it's pretty, I mean, that tendon's like, I mean, I can feel it, right, with my fingers. It's not very deep. It's probably an inch deep.
Then the flex pulse would be adequate for that.
That would be good too, huh?
If you had let's say arthritis in the shoulder joint, that's like that deep into the joint, then you need to calculate for the magnetic field. That's probably not going to be strong enough or adequate. Then you need something stronger. But you might need to go to 1,000 Gauss.
So you're trying to get to 200 Gauss at the tissue site.
At the tissue site. Well, 15 Gauss at the tissue site.
Oh, at least 15 Gauss at the tissue site, because that's what was shown to increase the adenosine.
To reduce inflammation, the best, yes.
Gotcha. Okay. Interesting. So pain, we talked about inflammation, we talked about the difference between PMFs and EMFs. We talked about trying to reduce our EMF exposure. We talked a lot of, I mean, even understand, I actually didn't know that about acupuncture meridians and how you can measure the basically electromagnetic, charge of the meridian.
The electrical charge primarily.
Electrical charge and the vortex that it creates. And now that makes so much more sense of why, if you put a needle there or a magnet there or whatever, it stimulates that, energetic pathway, which increases the body's natural, basically healing and regenerative properties. I find that really fascinating. I mean, but you said magnets work, but you found they don't work as well as PMFs. Is that what you said?
Correct. Largely because a PMF field is dynamic. It's moving in and out of the tissues. And because it's doing that, there's a lot more going on, a lot more activation in the body. If you have a magnet and you put a magnet, let's put a magnet on the skin, it's stationary. So what essentially, because it's electromagnetic, the magnetic interacts with the electrical, then basically what you have to do is you have to move something against the magnetic field. And in this case, it's the circulation or the nerve traffic that the nerves are conducting. Submarines use that principle to generate electricity for their batteries. It's called magnetohydrodynamics. So they have magnets in their hulls. As the seawater passes across the magnets, it stimulates charge. So the magnet is stationary, but the seawater is moving. And so it creates current, and that charges the batteries of the submarine. And so our bodies are doing basically the same thing. When you put a static magnet on top, this magnet is not moving, but something's got to be moving relative to the magnet to get the most benefit or the most effect from it.
So, I mean, this is just a crazy theory. Could somebody, I mean, there's people who claim to be breatharians, right? Who don't eat anything and live. I mean, I haven't met anyone personally, but in yogic traditions in India, and also there's even some people here in the United States who claim to be breatharian, who only drink water or like some juice once in a while or something like that. So I'm not sure that would be 100% breatharian. But is that, I'm just theorizing, is that even possible to be, to get all of your energetic needs from sources other than food? And like, because this is showing pulse electromagnetic frequency is increasing stem cells, it's increasing ATP production, which is what we really need food for. I mean, right? Is ATP right, for the most part.
So breatharians are relying on, when you starve, when you actually decide to starve, when you go on a starvation diet,
And we're not recommending this to anybody, by the way. Don't take it the wrong way. It's just this is just a philosophical conversation. I'm just curious.
So people who have stopped eating and are on strike for something or other, right? And so basically they stop eating. Usually within 2 to 3 weeks, they'll die. And usually it's because the body's breaking down heart muscle for fuel. So, and that's under a normal metabolic rate. So breatharians, because we know about yogis, they get buried in the ground. They drop their heart rates, they drop their metabolic rates, they drop everything down, and they get buried for a week or 2 weeks. And they get dug up. So when they're dug up, they don't go back like that. They have to gradually reinvigorate their tissues and cells. So what happens is cells that are under starvation have to find other ways of getting energy. So this is what happens with bears, hibernation. Other animals that go into hibernation, they slow down their metabolic rate tremendously and live off whatever they've stored.
Basically,
they go into hibernation.
Fat. They're basically living off of fat, I would imagine.
Primarily fat, but also protein, also breaking down muscle and mostly muscle.
Yeah.
And if they did it long enough, they would die.
Right. Yeah, because the liver will convert the muscle tissue into glucose, which is needed for the brain. I mean, it'll convert enough to keep your brain alive, basically.
Well, we go into anaerobic metabolism. It's called. So tissues have their natural reactions to switch over to anaerobic metabolism, but it's still metabolism. You still need the energy, the fuel, to keep those cells functioning. So we know that with animals, if you drown in cold water, you should not stop resuscitating somebody until they revive, because that's called a dive reflex. So the body goes into a hibernation mode, a low energy conservation mode. And as you're like those yogis, you have to reactivate the body to be able to go back to normal metabolism. So the body has these mechanisms, the capabilities of doing some of that to varying degrees.
Interesting. Have you ever met a breatharian? A true breatharian?
Not that I know of.
I know people who claim they are and teach workshops and stuff, but, I don't know. People claim a lot of things.
Well, they do. And I think it's possible. I don't know how active they are. I don't know how well their brains are working.
Okay, so that was a little out of left field, but I thought it was worth talking about. So anything else you think we should cover about PMFs that people need to know that we haven't covered already?
Well, I have 2 books. So the first book I mentioned to you was Power Tools for Health, which has 500 references. So if somebody wants the science and wants to geek out on the science, that book has the science to support magnetic field therapy and all the different ways it works. If you just want advice on how to use magnetic field therapy, then my other book is called Supercharge Your Health with magnetic field therapy. So Supercharge Your Health. And that's a how-to book on how to use magnetic fields. And we cover all the actions of magnetic fields in that book, and we review the treatment protocols for about 80 different health conditions, among which is cancer. And so cancer is a big area of interest, and I've written an ebook on PMFs and cancer. Magnetic fields do so much at a basic level in the body, basic cellular level. They're basically useful for almost all health conditions. Because if it's a cell, it needs the energy. If it needs energy, magnetic fields help the body to get it, to make it, and to use it. Right? So it almost doesn't really matter what you use it for. It's going to be helpful for almost everything. But especially it's helpful for cancer because it's a preventative. Because we know now that most cancers, when they're caught, have already produced stem cells by the time they're discovered. And then basically it's not a matter of treating the cancer at that moment, it's a matter of preventing recurrences, because the recurrences are typically what's going to kill you, and not the cancer at the moment. And so if you decrease inflammation in the body for the rest of your life, we're talking about the rest of your life, you decrease inflammation, those stem cells that are out in those bones don't wake up. And to do that, you have to have your own system. And it's got to be strong enough.
And so do you use a PMF device yourself every day? Like how often? At what?
Yes, I do it
What
every day.
Gauss?
I use it for one particular purpose. I don't have any major issues, other than I guess than maybe getting older.
I don't know. You still look pretty good for 122. You know.
I do, don't I? Now you're rounding me up.
A little bit.
I'm not ready to round up to that level yet. So I use it every day. I use it all night long. I have a pad that I put on my bed because I have had a couple of bouts of diverticulitis. I have a metal clip in my gut, my belly, and that can cause some havoc in the body. And I had a history of IBS. I removed gluten, dairy, and eggs from my diet. That settled that down. So I do it every night, all night, every night.
At what Gauss?
That one happens to be about 200 Gauss.
And you lay, and that's just a pad, full body pad that you lay on.
Put it basically on my belly.
Mm-hmm.
And then and we're coming out with our own machine that's going to be stronger. It's going to be about 1500 Gauss, so it's going to do a much better job in the belly. So if you're interested in that, get on our newsletter, and we'll let people know when it's available. It should be available probably in the next month or two.
How can people get on your newsletter? What's the website?
drpawluk.com. So drpawluk.com.
Cool.
And then I also use a sleep machine. So I use the Flex Pulse essentially to sleep all night. And then we have recently introduced a new device for sleep called the X Pulsar, which is just for sleep. And you use that in your pillow, inside the pillow cover, on top of the pillow, and run it all night long. And it's 3 hertz. It's delta.
So if I were using this on my knee while I'm sleeping, would it be better to have it at 3 hertz then, or still program?
I don't think it matters.
10 hertz doesn't matter.
I don't think it matters, but 3 hertz would work too.
Okay. You're still getting the 200 Gauss. It's just the hertz is it's not the intensity. It's the explain the difference in hertz when we're talking with, again, an electromagnetic. Sorry, because it's confusing.
Well, when we're using, in this case, we are using frequency, but we're combining the frequency with intensity.
Mm-hmm.
So the brain operates in different frequency ranges. It oscillates.
Right? You have alpha, you have beta, you have theta, you have delta,
gamma, delta, etc.
Yep.
But when you're sleeping at night, you want to be in delta because delta is the most restorative sleep.
Yep.
But you need to have a strong enough magnetic field to go deep into the brain to really capture the brain waves. So think of it this way. If I'm whispering in your ear, you can go la-di-da and not even hear me. If I'm having a conversation with you, it's hard to ignore me, but you can to some extent. But if I'm yelling in your ear, you can't ignore that at all. So that's capturing the brain waves. It's basically your brain is listening. So when you have a medium level magnetic field on top of your pillow, you're going to hear the clicking. So we call that audio magnetic entrainment. You're hearing it. It's entraining the brain to slow down and to go into that frequency. So you're getting the benefits of the magnetic field at the same time that you're getting the benefits of frequency modulation. That's when you do combine the two. But that's the only time I tend to combine the frequency with the intensities toward the brain.
So when the frequency range says 3 to 1,000 hertz on these devices, how is that different than the Gauss?
It's not Gauss at all. It's not intensity. It's just the pulse rate.
The pulse rate. So it's the rate at which
the magnetic field pulses.
Okay, so that's why it's measuring hertz. It's just the rate at the pulse. Okay, the pulse rate.
Of the
okay.
Pulse itself.
All right, that makes more sense now. Yeah, I think you explained that earlier. It was just still not totally clear in my mind.
Well, I'm sure that you are not the only one of people who are listening and watching. It's still going to be a matter of confusion about those two, but hopefully we've clarified it somewhat.
Yeah, clear for me now. So if you guys tuning in have other questions that we didn't cover, put them in the comment section below, and then we can bring Dr. Pawluk back on in the future and answer more questions. So I think it's a good place to end though. And you got your website.
We've been at it a bit, so
Dr.
everybody stayed awake while we were talking, then that's great if they stayed awake for that long.
I'm literally gonna go try and find that device right now. If not, I'm gonna call you because
let me know. Yes. Let me know.
Yeah. Awesome, man. I appreciate you. Thanks for coming on. Your books are available on your website or on Amazon. Where can people get your books?
Both.
Okay. And drpawluk.com.
And drpawluk.com has a huge amount of information.
Yep.
So if you want to drown, go ahead. Be our guest.
I've actually looked through a ton of articles on your site because you always have the reference to the research. That's where I've done quite a bit of research over the years. So appreciate you having those resources for people, and appreciate you coming on, man. This was a great conversation. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thanks again for having me on, and I'll see you in a few weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to it.
Thank you for listening to the Nathan Crane Podcast. Please make sure to subscribe and share this on social media. Then head over to nathancrane.com for your free ebook.
So when we're talking about, what are these underlying causes and conditions of these chronic diseases, cancer, diabetes, heart disease, they all have very similar, if not identical, causes. And that's the thing, is when we get to the root cause of these diseases, we can not only prevent these diseases from ever happening, but empower our bodies to heal from them.
In every one of our cells, we have tens and hundreds of thousands of chemical reactions that are happening every second that are cycling back and forth. And it's like sort of a yin and yang.
And, for me, the soul's purpose is evolution. It doesn't care about comfort. It cares about evolution. And so I think so long as we are following our soul, then we will evolve. And I think what sometimes blocks us from living our purpose, from manifesting that next level of our expression, is we have not evolved.
There is also a time for letting go all the expectations and relax and just breathe and be grateful for what you have achieved.